How can the growls of a hidden reality be heard? How could the world be multidimensional in a singular dimension? How are various systems of value and intelligent patterns here? For me, I found it very interesting. Not only are human beings primarily functioning through stories, through a sort of linguistic technology, the technology of language, but when we can revalue ourselves differently, it means simultaneously we have revalued the world. The moment where the human being separated itself for the planet to be in the planet, not just of the planet, nature's reflection is silent. The growls of the hidden reality is a suggestion that the unknown is the sky of your knowledge. The unknown is the areas of your reality where your sense of certainty is trying to project, your intelligence is trying to wonder about the future, but you don't realize the present is your own story. That means every person right now wondering about their future, they are seeing themselves as a character, because the concept of the past, present, and future is a sort of linear chronological movement of time. It's kind of going from A to B to C to D. So it's as if we think we were A, now we think we're B, and we think we're going to C. Okay, this can only exist for a character in a story. And so once the human truly confronts the mirror of existence and sees the attributeless presence of their experience of that point of that part of their intelligence, which is watching the world before it moves into meaning, there's always deeper dimensions to living phenomena. It's as if when you see something move, your mind instantly wonders, why did it move? And then your mind instantly wonders, where is it moving to? And eventually you see the interconnectivity of the various classifications of the same intelligence. What I mean by that is very simple. Imagine a person can look at a car, or they can look at the engine or the back seat or the trunk. It's as if suddenly one phenomena has been compartmentalized into sub-worlds. And so language is a world inside an objective world. So our thoughts seem to be not the first ones here. We feel existence was here first. This is where I think, therefore I am, is kind of doesn't make sense, because the concept of a thought requires an existential position prior. So in some sense we exist, and then experience is given color and meaning. And the most intense way, I kind of find it very interesting, like chemistry can, believe it or not, help in metaphysics. And not that just chemically. Excuse the extra noises, guys. I'm coughing with excitement, guys, to tell you this next part. Pretty much we see, for example, water. It finds itself in a sort of Water molecules can be, in some sense, moving really quickly, and in some sense be gas. They can be solidified and in some sense become ice, or maintain their natural liquid form. Okay? And so for me, just like how we can have actual physical particles reassemble or move in different intensities, the same way the mind is kind of moving, as if I find the archetypes behind man's eyes, uh, the unknown aspects of our intelligence, they are responding to how consciousness is their space. So what that means is, if I had a thought of a character, let's say we make a some character, okay? When I imagine, I'll say this, I'll make it more interesting. Imagine right now I wonder about a memory of myself when I was like 10 years old in my house in Iran, okay? And I remember just looking at my closet mirror. You know, my mirror had a closet. Sorry guys, these coughs are incredibly unprofessional. But pretty much I'm saying, like, when I was younger, I there was when I was 10 years old in Iran, my closet had these two kind of doors to it that would open from the inside. They would move inwards, and in some sense they had mirrors. So eventually these two mirrors that were the doors of the closet would face one another as I opened the closet. And so I would stand in front of it and I would see an optical illusion of my endless reflection. And so it was a moment where, right now, as I'm remembering that moment, when I was 10 years old and I was standing between those two mirrors, imagine right now I would go there and tell that sense of self, my 10-year-old self, one day, you know, you're going to be talking about this. In 2019, you're going to be talking about this. It's kind of like I'm trying to constantly share examples of kind of showing that life has deeper dimensions, but the most deepest findings of the external dimension will eventually report back to the inner dimensions of the being. That means, ask yourself this, and this is an important question for any human being I find to ask. You got to ask yourself, what does it mean to have something in this life? First of all, we're in a changing world. Okay, everything is changing. Now, to have something, let's say right now, you know, so many people in the world, they look at the economical global suffering and they're like, okay, the point of life is to get rich, and once I'm rich, I will help all. You know? So many people seek wealth. They're seeking a sort of abundance, a sort of endless resource for their mind to run free. That person, after attaining what they want, imagine all the stuff, all the objects, all the things you wanted in this life were at your disposal. They were right here. You had them. You're going to see, even though the object is going to be near you, let's say something intimate that a product that many people buy is clothing, for example, okay? Imagine you buy the greatest clothing, but then realize, like, when you're going to sleep, you take off the suit. So similarly, that's what I'm trying to tell you. The value of life is in its dynamic change and embrace of that change. If you don't, it's kind of like a being who doesn't embrace change is like a man who doesn't want to play with the soul of a living earth. You see, guys, on some sense, any choice a person makes in this world can fit into some category of value in some moment of attention or some person's life. What's so fascinating is that I thought that reality and history changes so much that imagine one we look like a thousand, like, let's say a couple hundred years ago in the past, and we're like, wow, look at our ancestors, how like primitive they were, how much they didn't know about the different ways they could live. So similarly, it's fair to say that regardless of how perfect we think the world and life is, in a couple hundred years, the children of the future generations are going to look back and be like, oh my God, look at how primitive our ancestors were. So what this means is, so now something to even add to this, that future sense of grandchildren of humanity were going to look at us and be like, oh my God, look at how primitive they are. They can also be seen by children a couple hundred years ahead of them as being primitive, even their opinion. So what does that mean? This fundamentally means that reality has no value. It's like a clay. It's like clay that the mind shapes. So what has value is the intelligence. And so intelligence, if it transcends objective justification, if there's even 0.001% chance that our sciences and our greatest formulas have this reality wrong, then we're all starting from the same platform. And the issue is how to conduct the unknown. So a knowledge of a civilization comes from how deeply that civilization has comprehended the unknown. The greatest inventions step out of the unknown. Pretty much their inventors pull that, they extract vision and from that which is not envisioned yet. It's very clear to me that life was not meant to just be purely a solo thing, a solo journey. It's as if, like, for how long can we contain the intelligence of a moment in language? And when will we hear the growl of the hidden reality, that reality that is hidden underneath every action? Kind of like you can say the hidden reality for a world that is that steps out of noise and movement, as if we associate that movement and noise as intelligence. Okay, but if we were in a Vedic culture, if we were yogis right now in Mountain Arunachala, on Arunachala Mountain in India, we would understand that silence and stillness is the cause. So what we can't tell is that we think we're just stuff in space, star stuff in space, stardust in space, But space is the cause. We are born out of space. We're not born out of like the Big Bang. Eventually, I find the source of the source must be unknown, or it will not be the source of the source. It will just be the source. It would be the first reality, not the underlying realities underneath it, because the immensity of dimensions are different. You know, it's like people think multidimensionalities. You know, science gives too much symmetry to the world before the world has asked for it. You can say logic is a sort of trying to be symmetrical to the values prior. I want to read for you some quotes from a man named Buckminster Fuller, R. Buckminster Fuller. And he, to be honest, his name was introduced to me from an Alan Watt lecture. But eventually I came to realize he's this person with incredible views on design. And it's as if he's kind of he's looking at society in ways, his eyes are open to the design of civilization in ways that all beings can appreciate, I find. So I'm going to get into what I call a quote tunnel. So sometimes in these Mr. Within talks, I just kind of like dig through a list of quotes of like a certain person. So I'm going to read a bunch of Buckminster Fuller quotes. Richard Buckminster Fuller. Fuller says, dare to be naive. Fuller says, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. Very true. Fuller says we should do away with the absolutely specious notion that everybody has to earn a living. It is a fact today that 1 in 10,000 of us can make a technological breakthrough capable of supporting all the rest. The youth of today are absolutely right in recognizing this nonsense of earning a living. We keep inventing jobs because of this false idea that everybody has to be employed at some kind of drudgery, because according to Malthusian Darwinian theory, he must justify his right to exist. So we have inspectors of inspectors and people making instruments for inspectors to inspect inspectors. The true business of people should be to go back to school and think about whatever it was they were thinking about before somebody came along and told them they had to earn a living. So he's bringing up a good point, because to justify existence, we justify it by the full expression of our intelligence. And the full expression of our intelligence is its dynamic form. So you see, it's as if like you can't really tell somebody is strong if they don't pick up a weight. You know, you could say they're big, but you can't say they're strong. It is something that in stillness and silence is potential energy. Suddenly, the moment the person moves, the energy becomes kinetic. The karmic structure shifts. The attention of the mind is evoked differently. Or navigated differently. Oh, wow, this next sentence is incredible. Buckminster Fuller says, there's nothing in a caterpillar that tells you it's going to be a butterfly. Fuller says, I live on Earth at present, and I don't know what I am. I know that I am not a category. I am not a thing, a noun. I seem to be a verb, an evolutionary process, an integral function of the universe. Exactly, guys. This Buckminster Fuller is pretty much like this man's seeing this. I'm astonished by this quote. Exactly, guys. We're a dynamic. Life is not something to believe in one story. This is why faith required action. Even religions ask you to act. Do you see? The reason is because in activity, it's as if you need fire to cook a meal. So similarly, you need space to have matter. Fuller says, never forget that you're one of a kind. Never forget that if there weren't any need for you in all your uniqueness to be on this earth, you wouldn't be here in the first place. And never forget, no matter how overwhelming life's challenges and problems seem to be, that one person can make a difference in the world. In fact, it is always because of one person that all the changes that matter in the world come about. So be that one person. And I find when he says be that one person, it means that it's usually a change is an opportunity. Okay, it is something that you can either let life happen to you or you can happen to life. And you have to find your balance between these two modes of being. So there's going to be some moments in life where you're going to want things from life, and there's going to be some moments where life is going to want things from you. Now, depending on where the child is kind of raised on this planet, it will work in opposite ends. That means some cultures, they ask of the person of something. Some cultures, it's opposite. The person is asking the culture. For me, it's just different routes up the same mountain or different approaches in the same existential condition. Fuller says human beings always do the most intelligent thing after they've tried every stupid alternative and none of them have worked. This man is a comedian. Fuller says, when I'm working on a problem, I never think about beauty. But when I have finished, if the solution is not beautiful, I know it is wrong. Everything you've learned in school as obvious becomes less and less obvious as you begin to study the universe. For example, there are no solids in the universe. There's not even a suggestion of a solid. There are no absolute continuums. There are no surfaces. There are no straight lines. Interesting. So I think where he says there are no solids in the universe, I mean, I've heard a scientific kind of statement that says that 99.9% of the atom is empty. But then he says there's not even a suggestion of a solid. Okay, there's definitely a suggestion of a solid. No, he means like when you look at nature, it is too unknown to even think that it is, I feel, just tangible. Anyways, he says there are no absolute continuums. Yes, the universal sector is based on change. Then he says there are no surfaces because the surfaces are changing. There's never one surface. He says there are no straight lines. And I think what he means by that is that one moment cannot rule all moments. That means regardless of how much the being comes to conceptualize and wonder about the nature of this universe, eventually not only will it change, but the data will change. So the thing is, scientists think that it's the placebo effect that's changing the result of the experiment. It's not. It's the nature of the universe. No two moments are the same. So no two moments can be the same value. You can choose to see the value there, but that depends on the inner reality. Because the way our eyes are open, I perceive it like this. It's like right now, you see the objective reality, but then you wonder what is seeing the objective reality. You suddenly recognize the animated, subtler planes of your imagination and abstraction. So if you notice, memories are what you imagine as real, and you can say imagination is that which you remember as unreal. So for me, it's the intelligent is self-generating. That's the uniqueness of it. It's human beings are incredibly fragile creatures. The fact that we're all alive here and nothing was able to kind of disturb this means that it's as if like something wants the world existence to exist. And not that something wants it. I mean, we personalize it. It's very fair to say that true mysticism means you're leaving the realm of concepts, which means that it doesn't, some truths, it's not meant for man's mind. It's like the ant. Imagine an ant under a pebble suddenly realizes why a person wears a hat to work. I mean, sure, you realize it, but it's not relevant to the existential design. And this is why your existence is based on the objects and subjects design, and your experience is based on the observer uh, uh, of the subject and object. So your mind is being space, so assuming it is space or being space, so it can create many ways. It's so it can create itself in many ways. Fuller says, Buckminster Fuller says, everybody is born a genius, but the process of living de-geniuses them. This is pretty interesting. He says, Fuller says, if you want to teach people a new way of thinking, don't bother trying to teach them. Instead, give them a tool, the use of which will lead to new ways of thinking. Okay, that's an interesting approach. Uh, Buckminster Fuller says, I'm enthusiastic over humanity's extraordinary and sometimes very timely ingenuity. If you're in a shipwreck and the boats are gone, a piano top buoyant. If you're in a shipwreck and all the boats are gone, a piano top buoyant enough to keep you afloat that comes along makes a fortuitous life preserver. But this is not to say that the best way to design a life preserver is in the form of a piano top. I think that we are clinging to a great many piano tops and accepting yesterday's fortuitous contrivings as constituting the only means for solving a given problem. Yeah, yeah. What he's saying is true. We're too defined by the past because we don't know any better, and there is the terror of the unknown because we haven't confronted yet. Anything you don't confront, it becomes intense for you. So my greatest advice to you people is that listen, from the moment you wake up, stuff's happening and stuff's gonna happen, and don't be afraid of it. Just live life. You can choose to envision a complex future and schedule and choose to live in whatever way, or you can choose to take life as it comes. Both give you different advantages. It's like one is somebody practicing kicking, the other is practicing punching. Both have their uses, but in different contexts. Buckminster Fuller says, geniuses are just people who had good mothers. Fuller says, the minute you choose to do what you really want to do, it's a different kind of life. Wow, wow. The minute you choose to do what you really want to do, it's a different kind of life. Yeah, that's so true. He says, I'm not a genius, I'm just a tremendous bundle of experience. He says, in order to change an existing paradigm, you do not struggle to try and change the problematic model. You create a new model and make the old one obsolete. Yeah, we went over this. Oh, wow, this is incredible. He says Buckminster Fuller says, humanity is acquiring all the right technology for all the wrong reasons. Yeah, it's as if like our technological advancement is not considering human nature. It is as if something else is it's being driven to something else. It's like the desire for technology's advancement is does not care about the human. I think it's just a desire to see what is beyond human. This is why um, the worship of duality, in some sense, leads to it leads to confusion too much. It's like, what do you want to believe in a changing world? To be honest, like that's the question. What kind of belief could you possibly want in a changing world? This doesn't mean you can't use beliefs. It doesn't mean you can, a belief is a concentration. It's as if your attention is meant to be kept on that. So any person who has beliefs right now, Mr. Within is not saying get rid of your beliefs. I'm saying meditate on your beliefs. Wonder why you're being and living through that mode of thought. Wonder if you're a thought even. I personally say you're not a thought. That means I'm using thoughts right now. If you ask me who am I and I gave you like some story of myself, that would be a momentary generation. The language can never be the communicator. The communication can never be the communicator, but it's a reflection. So it's kind of like you can say existence is God's communication. Or the communication of this universe. Our intelligence can be considered as the expression of a macrocosmic perspective. The reason I wanted to say growls of the hidden reality is because that is where excitement lives. It is unknown. What you know eventually gets boring if the pattern repeats. And right now in our current civilization, human beings' work is designed to repeat the same thing. People are going to work repeating the same thing. Like repeat, repeat, repeat. Now, there are exceptions to different careers and whatnot, but like I'm saying mainly the majority of human beings, their intelligence is just trying to keep up with the program, and that's cruel. It's as if society's game, the game of our civilization, is stealing people's minds from them. It is stealing their people's minds not by stealing it, but by chaining them to a sort of routine in which there is no new dimension added, or at most you just do the same thing in a new way. This is in some sense tragic because it is a prison of lack of conceptual exploration. So for me, if we consider we're not just physical beings, then that means we have to consider the mind's existence. If we have to consider the mind's existence, we have to consider the existence of the relationship of imagination with reality. When we wonder about that, eventually we come to how the moment is in some sense being drawn. And eventually the search stops. You legit reach a point where you know the answer cannot be said to you. I don't know what these gurus are like. Like I have incredible respect for mystical thought, but I don't have like I have certain respect. But for me, it's like there's no truth that somebody has in their pocket, and you need to have them give you. It's about a sort of uh, will. You're a free will right now. Like if your name is Will, you're gonna really resonate with my talk on free will. So we gotta not just study our free will. Okay, let me see if I could have a play on words here. The only way we can free will is for Will to see that it's free, that he's free. We have to free the will from the identity through the discovery of the ultimate presence of nature that resides in man's experience. Your sensory data is not, it's not like, you treat it like language. We divide the senses, but the intelligence is too integrative to be otherwise. So what happens when you realize your mind is an integrative factor in the presence of how reality is in the moment? You see that you cannot avoid the mind. And that's the issue with thinking you're just a materialistic being. You never wonder about deeper dimensions. You never wonder about what you're truly seeing. And that is the issue of acceptance. This is why man could never define himself, because we were always defined by the greatness of the future. Humanity is what we're alive for, not the human being. The human being lives 100 years. Humanity is what every human being lives for. It is an eternal vision. What is evolution? The eternal effort, the endless effort for a creature to keep continuing its existence. Okay, so for me, evolution is an eternal force. It is an eternal force inspired out of a sort of perceptive consequence. So what this means is either our language has to evolve and acquire new dimensions. We have to see our language has to expand or evolve, or in some sense it has to change. What resists life, eventually life will resist it. I've learned this, guys. I've learned this both the easy way and the hard way. It's as if I learned it the easy way, then suddenly the hard way also happened, and I learned it the hard way. And so what I mean by that is that the world, if you look at it, the intelligent world, there's a non-intelligent component to your reality. That when I say non-intelligent, that means your free will has nothing to do with it. It's like I can imagine like myself being as big as like a skyscraper, but that's only in the domain of imagination. You see, it is in a subtler way the world is that it has meaning. So kind of like imagination exists because it has design, but doesn't exist because it's not tangible, physical. What that means is if I imagine like a glass of orange juice right now, it's not going to just appear in my hand, but I could imagine holding one. I even have memories of holding one. So it's as if the guys, like a certain Buddhist practitioner, suddenly gets some profound insight, and his friend's like, "Oh my God, I feel you just saw your past life. What were you doing in your past life?" And this guru's like, or let me say it like this: imagine they go to this Buddhist, and like all the new Buddhist students are like, "Oh my God, this sage has seen his past life," and they go to this sage, and they're like, "Tell us, what were you doing in your past life?" And he's like, "Nothing, man, just drinking a glass of orange juice. That's all I saw from my past life." There's a story, like traditionally, this story is for lions, but it's interchangeable with a tiger. I mean, it works the same way, I think. Pretty much, yeah, I'll say it with a tiger. Pretty much, this tiger is walking by, and it walks by like this farm where there's a group of sheep. The tiger suddenly, strangely sees in the middle of this sheep, there's a tiger just standing crowded with sheep around it, all huddled up. And this tiger, this older tiger's like, what am I witnessing right now? And he sees this tiger in the middle of a group of sheep, like in the fence of the farm or whatever. And so strangely, what happens is that this older tiger suddenly goes to the fence and shouts, "Tiger! Tiger in the middle of the sheep!" And the tiger doesn't acknowledge. The moment the tiger says, "Hey, you weird sheep," you know, suddenly when a sheep is called, the tiger in the middle of the sheep, his attention appears. So this older tiger realizes, oh my God, this tiger thinks he's a sheep. And he eventually makes a growl or something, and all the sheep run away except this tiger who thinks he's a sheep. You know, this tiger who he thinks he's a sheep. He's just stood there, And so suddenly he sees like, oh my God, there's a bravery in this tiger, like that the sheep did not have. Okay, so the tiger starts to see this in himself. The tiger that thinks he's a sheep, he's like, why did I not run away, but all the sheep did? Eventually, the older tiger calls the younger lion, and the younger lion listens, trusts his intuition, and eventually, the older tiger takes him to a pond and says, "Look in the pond. Tell me what you see." And the tiger looks in the pond, the tiger that thinks it's a sheep, and looks at the tiger and says, "Sheep. I see a sheep." And then the tiger growls a loud growl and says, "Look again." And he looks and then says, "Look at my reflection. What do you see?" And suddenly it's as if the dots are being connected. And this tiger that thinks is a sheep is like, "Oh my God, I'm a tiger. It's definitely clear I'm a tiger. Like, how did I not notice this before?" And again, traditionally, this story was said by lions, you know? And I don't understand what kind of shepherd, like, existed back in the day who didn't notice, like, a lion or a tiger, you know, thinking it's a sheep. Like, come on, man. Think of it this way. If a person can be ignorant, and it's said that it is to err is to be human, so in other words, we are a species that makes mistakes. So what that means is we have to manage not only our success, but our failure. The reason people feel failure really brings down their vibe, I guess, or their energy, is because they don't know what to do after. But if you know what to do after, how can you have failed? There's two sorts of failure, by the way. There's an outer failure and there's an inner failure. The outer failure is when you were expected to do something and you didn't do it, or you couldn't do it, or whatever. You know, so outer failure requires outer effort. So it's like only hard work and incredible amounts of practice of your art form can take you towards the peaks of its mastery. But we see internal failure is different. Internal failure comes across as revelation because the mind is like a spotlight where a world, a subjective realm, is a subjective landscape is being lit up by the attention of the moment. It's very incredible. Sometimes when I'm giving these talks, because I acknowledge the silence, I am comfortable with silence. You know, to some degree I am. And this silence, it's as if once you befriend the chaos of your order and the order of your chaos, you experience a completed mind. And a completed mind does not linger in inefficient stories. You have to free yourself from your own way you have kept yourself. This can only occur through an authentic self inquiry. You have to wonder about who you are and get a bit angry at how you don't know it yet. And then suddenly the inspiration arises. They say like attracts like, so in some sense, if the being wants to attain freedom, it must be free first. It's kind of like this, you know, some uh, wealthy folk say that the first million is the hardest. Why is that so? Because it has never happened. But once it has happened, the possibility is there. That means it's like somebody might find a certain doubt of if their business can continue in the future, but suddenly they see they don't have a doubt when they want to go get a cup from the drawer and from the cupboard and get a glass of water or something. They don't doubt that the simplicity of the process because its incredible amounts of repetition has proven its possibility. So the thing is that we only fail when we attempt the impossible. Because what we know is possible, how can we fail? The designs have been there. It's about walking your own walk, and during this walk realizing eternity is the space of a temporal being. You know, it's as if like Shiri Nisargadatta has this nice quote. He says, "When I see that I am nothing, that is wisdom. When I see that I am everything, that is love. And in between, my life moves." You, that sentence, "life moves," is the all-encompassing. It's kind of like the final topic you need to pay attention to before you kind of wake up as a rhythm of your, as a field of intelligence. When you wake up as a field of intelligence, something unique happens. You suddenly see there is one, how can I tell you? If I ask you what your greatest tool is, you, some people might say my phone, my laptop, my whatever, but I will tell you your greatest tool is the presence of your attention. And any being who truly wonders about the presence of their attention, I am telling you, and you are, the world will bow to the worlds you have walked through. Because novelty, it's like the new holds the past in the present. Not only the past holds the future. This is very important, guys. The concept of reflection. Okay, this is, it's very important because I'm starting to see it's as if we have had no progress. I feel the educational system, it's pretty much walking into a dead end. What that means is it's dead end. The dead end for the educational system is infinity. That means, you see, there's never, we can never stop the experiments for the clarification of knowledge because the landscape is infinite. It's like, how can someone index the whole cosmos to see a sort of value or probability of something? It's like, I'm telling you, what we see that is real is what we have put there to see. We are a civilization obsessed with our embodiment. Therefore, our approach to our mind and the unknown has been to embody it. That attempt to embody the unknown has resulted to language and the branches of knowledge. But now we will come to a conclusion. It's as if the species will suddenly wake up that we're going to see all animals in nature. You, for example, not all, but like you see many animals in nature where you see groups of, like, for example, fish swim together. You see groups of birds like make strange synchronistic wave patterns in the sky. So you begin to see individuals behaving as a field of intelligence. And I feel that's the reason that everything exists. It is the individual to recognize it has one place to go, and that is a collective intelligence. So what that means is, eventually a lot of philosophy and pretty much language's dead end is going to make us to at least re-envision the collective individually, as if the ego's last stand is to live for everybody else before it dies. Did you know, to sometimes free the world, you have to first free the world from how you see it and then observe a nature without meaning? and then as you watch, the world it reanimates. You got to kind of understand the reanimative potential, like how your intelligence animates itself. When you understand this, I don't know how to say it, but like it takes a lifetime to become aware of how time was bringing forth the experience of life. I find that infinity exists in a sort of mathematical realm. That means I find one language superior to just like, the language we acknowledge in regards to words to be mathematical language. Because mathematical language was required as a kind of like, I don't know if this is the right word to use, but as a substratum for linguistics, for language. Language required separation, which mathematics provided. So pretty much divide and conquer. We saw the unknown, we divided ourselves in it and with it, and now we're trying to conquer it eventually to realize it's too big to conquer. So when a person can't carry the weight of the world on their shoulder, they recognize the world is not meant to be carried. The world carries the being. Nature moves you as much as you think you're moving nature. If you say the purpose of your life is to just move nature, you're going to see eventually you're going to have disturbances because the state of mind changes. When the state of your mind changes, it means you got to take into consideration the new way that the world seems to you or is viewed in, comes across in your view. You know what I feel, guys? I feel like I mean, of course, these are bold words I'm saying. It's like I'm one man among 8 billion, and I'm just sharing how I'm seeing it from my angle, from how my eyes have opened to the world. There's so many ways the world is working right now that I cannot even fathom because the concept or the viewpoint or whatever it is has not come into display. What that means is I know the power of the unknown, and the power of the unknown has tamed my ego. As it has tamed my ego has in some sense dissolved like a snowflake in sunlight in the vastness of truth. So you see, when you look at the macrocosm, in some time, for some people it inspired, oh, the stars. For some people, when they realized the macrocosm, and suddenly it settled in what Plato was saying, as above, so below. It was in some sense a heartbreak. It was a heartbreak because they're like, it's so big. The world is so big that as long as we think we're individuals, we can never access any other mode of it. We are in a world of design, that is fair to say. Because we're in a world of design, what do we notice? Fundamentally, there's attention and there's design. So think of it this way: before anybody was, in some sense, any religion or science or any story the person decided to wear. Similarly, it's kind of like we're all designers at first. We're all watching design, and eventually, as the consciousness has in some sense absorbed enough information to be in a certain formation, to be in formation, as is kind of like what information really means. It is how forms are in a way. And eventually, you just discover these deeper rhythms. To be honest, I should probably think of a good term to call it. I could say intuitive rhythms. That means it's as if the intuition has nothing to do with the belief system. It has to do with how the intelligence is abiding with the macrocosm, how the world is holding you, and again, how you're holding the world based on how far you've seen the world hold you. There's many mysteries here, but it's the issue is that better things can be done, but they're not being done. You know, and they're not even being attempted because nobody's even considering it. Like the educational system, there should have been so many rebellions against the general way that education exists on this planet. Like literally students should have rebelled. Students have been like, is this what you think education is? Imagination is a very crucial part of education, because when you try to remember things, even certain specialists who research memory, they in some sense have said whatever you imagine more abstract or more meaningless or in unreal ways, it kind of stays in your long-term memory. So kind of suggesting that memory is in a field of imagination, which means a field where images are just moving around without a sort of order or a sort of orbit. I mean, I have this belief that all often ideas are orbiting around the idea of yourself. That means how you perceive the world doesn't have to do with, to be honest, how far you've learned something or studied something, because there's aspects of the mind, for example, the subconscious and the unconscious aspects of the mind. And the unconscious could be even personal or it could be collective. And so it is very crucial to comprehend the vastness of how intelligence is moving, which we are just a, tiny drop in the stream, you know. So thanks, guys. Thanks for listening. Um, Pretty much all that I'm saying comes down to finding a sort of peace and serenity and contentment with what you see in the mirror of existence experientially. It's a very great feeling when the being becomes an unconditional presence. Thought no longer is pulling them. But this doesn't mean you reject thought. It means it's everything. It's like you use your car, but the car is not a purpose of your life. It serves a sort of purpose, but it's not the purpose of your life. You use a car to get to another destination, use a certain vehicle to transition, and so similarly, um, we're using knowledge and reality and language to, in some sense, see beyond how the sensory data exists. So pretty much we are an unknown experiencer wondering about an unknown existence. And every living being can contribute in this domain, because when it comes to the mind, there are no rulers. All rulers are already broken by the ability of vision. Behind your eyes, reality can change instantaneously. In front of your eyes, the instantaneity is not seen, because it's so gradual. It's as if life is changing in a slower way. Your thoughts are changing quicker than your body, than your physical reality. Your mind is changing more than your body, so you feel you are something more than a body. Yet to just think you're a body means that the consciousness cannot exist or is a hallucination. So because consciousness can ask the question, it means that it's not empty. Because the design is here, it's like one object can have meaning to many people. A person, two people can look at a cup of tea and one person can think it's warm and the other can think it's cold. You know, you can, it's like the same tea, but different modes of meaning extracted from the same phenomenon. So eventually a great network shall begin, the multidimensional renaissance shall occur, and the growls of the hidden reality shall become the inventions of a future that has not avoided the presence of the past, and yet realizes the presence of the future transcends the limits, because how else would it be the future? Something has to change. And it is the embrace of change which leads to the clarity of the changeless. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Much blessings and namaste.